order. Welcome to the March 2nd meeting of the City of Raleigh Appearance Commission. My name is Will Gaskins. I'm the Vice Chair of the Commission. The Raleigh Appearance Commission is a public body appointed by the City Council that exercises both advisory and quasi-judicial functions. The Appearance Commission's responsibilities relate to zoning and other land use matters, as well as the visual quality and aesthetic characteristics of the city. Today's agenda includes requests for design alternates from the city's Unified Development Ordinance. When hearing requests for design alternates, the Appearance Commission sits as a quasi-judicial body and conducts an evidentiary hearing on the request. What that means is, like a court hearing, state law sets specific procedures and rules concerning how this commission must make its decisions. The commission's decisions are constrained by the standards in the city's ordinance and the facts presented in the hearing. The commission hears and considers evidence presented at the hearing and applies the standards set forth in state law and the city's ordinance. The commission must base its decision upon competent material and substantial evidence presented at the hearing. If you will be speaking as a witness, please focus on the facts and standards, not personal preference or opinion. This meeting is open to the public and everyone is welcome to watch. However, participation in the evidentiary hearings is limited. Parties have the right to participate fully. Parties may present evidence, call witnesses, make legal arguments. Witnesses may testify as to facts to which they are competent to testify, so long as those facts relate to the legal standards. In addition, lay or non-expert witness testimony is limited to facts, not opinions. For certain topics, the commission needs to hear opinion testimony from expert witnesses. These topics include projections about impacts on property values and projections about impacts on traffic safety. So I think at this point we've got 6, so we'll keep with the normal agenda. I believe DA 25, 2021, because of noticing, will be renoticed for the April meeting, correct? So that takes us to DA 27, 2022. And before we begin the hearings, I'd like to remind applicants to keep your presentations brief, considering our agenda, and I believe this is a continuation from a couple of months. So we will now open the evidentiary hearing for item DA 27, 2022. Casey Evans will introduce the hearing. If you will confirm that you have been sworn in for today's hearing.
I have not been sworn in yet.
All right, then. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Excellent.
Thank you. As you mentioned, this case was continued from the February 2nd Appearance Commission meeting to this evening. The subject property is located at the northeast corner of West Hargett Street and South Harrington Street, and it is zoned downtown mixed use, 40 stories, with a shop front frontage and conditional use. The applicant is proposing a mixed-use building with structured parking for commercial and residential uses. The applicant is requesting one design alternate for complete relief from the requirement for vehicles to enter and exit parking areas in a forward motion for the proposed driveway on South Harrington Street. The applicant has withdrawn the 2 other requests that they had previously made in the original application. So they just have the one design alternate request today. And here are your 4 findings that need to be satisfied in order to grant the design alternate request. And with that, I am available for questions, and I'll invite transportation up if they have any updates to provide to you.
Bradley Kimbrell, Transportation.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do. No additional comments. We've been here before. If you have any questions, I'm here to help any way I can.
Okay. The applicant will now present evidence and legal arguments in support of the request. And as a reminder, any evidence and argument must focus on the applicable standards.
Good evening. I'm Matthew Carpenter with Parker Poe, 301 Fayetteville Street, here on behalf of the applicant for our one remaining design alternate request for 330 West Hargett Street. And I do have one witness who will testify, and I swear him in right now, Richard Adams.
If you'll state your name and address, and then.
Richard Adams, 421 Fayetteville Street with Kimley Horn.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, perfect. And so this case was before you on January 5th and February 2nd. And at both of those hearings, we presented evidence to each of the alternate findings. And so tonight, we'll just focus on the specific questions that were asked at the February 2nd meeting and what we've done to respond to those. And so this slide, just to refresh your memory, shows an aerial of the site. You can see it's the western portion of the block there, and adjacent to the right, plan right, are the Dawson condos in white, and then also the Hugh apartments to the southeast of us. And as you can tell from this graphic, it's really a long, narrow-shaped lot by virtue of the built-out nature of the rest of the block. So both the Dawson and condo buildings really push right up there to our property line. And then these are our 3 original design alternate requests, and just to reiterate, between January and February, we worked with staff and were able to reach resolutions on 2 and 3. So the only remaining request tonight is for relief from section 8.3.5A from the requirement to allow vehicles to enter and exit the loading dock in a forward motion. So that's just for the loading dock on South Harrington Street. And then at the February meeting, we addressed all of these findings, but where we kind of left the meeting was that there was still some work to be done on number 2, and specifically that you asked us to revise our truck movements exhibit to better show that the turns work with the revised South Harrington streetscape that we had worked out with staff, and then 2, to commit to specific safety features at the loading dock. And so you may recall we had a long list of features that we said we're fine with all of these, but we hadn't kind of drilled down on specific ones. And so before the meeting today, we submitted 2 exhibits that are supplementary exhibits that are in your agenda. The first is the truck movement exhibit to show that the turns work with our revised curb cut that we tweaked. And then the second exhibit addresses the safety features at the loading dock. So at this time, I'd like to call Richard Adams to discuss both of those briefly.
Good evening.
Could you state your name, address, and education for the commission?
Sure. Richard Adams. I'm with Kimley Horn, address 421 Fayetteville Street here in downtown Raleigh. Education, Bachelor of Civil Engineering here at NC State, and then Master's in Civil Engineering and Master's in Management from Georgia Tech.
Thanks. At this time, I'd like to tender Mr. Adams as an expert in transportation engineering. And what's your role been in this project, Richard?
Basically serving as the transportation engineer throughout the project, and also had lots of conversations with city and NCDOT staff.
And can you hit the next slide and then
Absolutely.
Explain what we've done to respond to the commission's questions related to the truck movements at the loading dock?
Sure. As you can see, well, backing up to the previous meeting, of course, you guys asked some good questions about the loading maneuvers and the way the kind of the impact of the parking and loading being where they are a little closer to the maneuvers because of moving the bike lane to the other side of the street. Well, excuse me, flipping the bike lane in the parking. Let me get that right. And so what we did was we reran the truck maneuvers as shown here with the new conditions in place. And basically, a couple of things came as we did find a minor conflict with the curb as it was shown. And so the curb opening is now widened to 36 feet so that all of the maneuvers in both directions to and from both docks can be made within the curb ramp that's shown. And this is also, I believe, in your packet as Exhibit 1, if I have that right. And to be specific here, the red maneuvers on this exhibit show the trucks turning in and out of the furthest bay from the direction they are coming from. And then the blue is going to and from the closer bay, which would be the more difficult maneuver of the two. And so with this, we also did tweak both the loading area and the on-street parking a little bit on the other side. Again, getting into the detail a little more, we did find some minor conflicts. And so we removed 2 parking spaces on I guess that would be the south end, and we slightly adjusted the loading zone, the on-street loading zone, to the north. So yeah, that's the changes we made.
Thanks, Richard. Can you also explain what we've done to respond to the questions regarding the safety feature commitments?
Sure. Again, y'all had some good questions about that. And so we've revised the exhibit to show safety features that the applicant is committing to as part of the loading dock. And so just to highlight a few, they're all on this exhibit. And I believe this exhibit is also in your packet. But some of the things that I think are definitely worth mentioning are planters. I think it's item 8 on the exhibit here. Well, excuse me, let me get my numbers right. Item 6 on the exhibit here. Planters or planting areas that would kind of nudge the pedestrians away from the opening a little bit, increasing sight lines between the truck driver and the pedestrians, making sure they can see each other. Another thing to highlight, I think it's number 5 for visually impaired pedestrians. We've got detectable warning pavers or some kind of surface that lets them know that there's a changing condition. And then we're also showing roll down doors for the loading dock and the other features as well. One thing to mention, these are all commitments by the applicant, but doesn't preclude other safety features being added based on comments from the city. But this is kind of set as a minimum that the applicant is committing to. Certainly ready to work with staff on anything else needed.
Thanks. Also, is it your opinion that with these changes and the loading dock as proposed, that it won't increase congestion or compromise safety?
Yes, based on the revised loading dock entrance, the truck turn movements, which we just showed you, and the commitments to the safety features, we believe the request does not increase congestion or compromise safety.
Thank you, Mr. Adams. No further questions for this witness. I know we've had several hearings, and so if it's okay with the commission, I'd like to briefly summarize our evidence that we've heard from January to now. Let's see. So in regards to the first finding that the request is consistent with the intent of Section 8.3.5, Mr. Pung and Mr. Adams testified that the loading dock is in the location agreed to with staff, and that the safety features will improve pedestrian safety and minimize conflicts at the loading dock. And then to the second finding, Mr. Adams, a transportation engineer, testified at all 3 hearings that the request for trucks to back into the loading dock will not increase congestion or compromise safety, and that the additional features we've added will be effective in reducing conflicts. And then today, Mr. Adams supplemented his testimony by explaining that the revised loading dock width will ensure that there are no conflicts with the truck movements in both scenarios. And then to the third finding, Ms. Milliman with Stewart testified that the request doesn't conflict with any approved or built city construction project, roadway construction project. And then finally, to the fourth finding, Mr. Pung and Mr. Adams testified that accommodating a through loading dock access is not physically feasible due to the narrow, unusual nature of the lot and existing development to the east. And so with all that testimony, we feel we've met our burden here and shown that the request meets all 4 of the findings, and we respectfully request that the commission approves our design alternate. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now hear from other individuals wishing to provide factual testimony. Is there anyone here from the public who would like to participate? Seeing none. Any applicant rebuttal or questions from the commission?
I've got a couple, I think for the applicant. First, could you just confirm that striped zone on the, I guess it's the west side of Harrington? Is that for your project in particular, or is that just for general use for anybody on that street?
My understanding, that's a general use loading zone, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong, but general use, yes.
Okay. And while the loading dock is being used, do you have anything, any commitments in place as far as on-site employees or contractors that'll be there to direct traffic and keep people from walking into the path of trucks coming in and out?
I don't know. I'm going to actually let Matthew make sure I don't misspeak. Thank you.
Yeah, we don't, just because the language of trying to define exactly when someone will be there and to what degree is difficult. And so the direction we went was more to address potential conflicts with the physical features on the site. So the pavers, the planters, and things like that. I mean, it's something we can consider if the commission finds it important, but something that we haven't included in our resubmittal. So.
And then I think, Bradley, I got a quick question for you just for my own edification. On these, the truck turn analysis, is it common for trucks to turn or swing into the oncoming traffic lane to make their movement into the loading docks in a downtown setting?
In the downtown setting, it is fairly common.
Okay. Do you have any concerns over safety and with regard to this design?
Staff does not.
Okay. Thank you.
Bradley, while you're up, and this is related, but maybe slightly beyond, in terms of the layout of the on-street parking in the loading zone, if, and how that impacts some of the curb cuts on the opposite side of the street, would that loading zone, continue to potentially shift around if there's, other sites? I believe it's a parking lot across the street. And are those curb cuts being abandoned that are in front of the loading zone? Can you provide maybe a little bit more context there?
Sure. So as far as the frontage of Harrington, today that general purpose loading zone exists more or less where this plan shows it. As it's my understanding, our parking division within transportation worked with the food hall to identify that location. It serves several uses along that block. Confirming with our friends in parking, they also confirmed that this site plan would be able to use the loading area just the same. And to the point, upon redevelopment of that mid-block area, we would see likely some of those driveways go away, potentially more parking available as a result of that. Does that answer the question?
Yep, it does. Thank you.
One more question for the applicant. For trash removal, trash pickup, recycling pickup, is that happening inside the loading dock or are those being pulled outside?
I think they're being pulled outside, but I don't know for sure. Yep, that's correct.
They're being pulled outside?
Right.
Okay, onto the street?
Yes. Yes, just briefly for trash pickup, I believe.
Okay. So do you anticipate any trucks actually pulling in forward and then backing out, or is everything going to be a backing in and pulling out forward?
Mr. Adams can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'd anticipate that they would back in because it's the easiest maneuver. And I understand it'll take, it oftentimes takes several back ends to get exactly in there, so it's not as sweeping of a motion as you see on the exhibits, so there'll be some time there to kind of assess the location and make sure no one's in the path, right?
Thank you.
Anything further from the commission? Applicant, anything further before we close? Okay, hearing no additional questions or presentation of relevant facts, the commission will now close the hearing and bring the matter to the table. As a reminder, this commission is tasked with deciding if, based off of the evidence presented, this proposal meets the applicable standards. This decision cannot be based on the personal preference of commission members, rather it is based on standards and evidence. If based on its deliberation, the commission requires additional evidence, the commission will reopen the hearing. And with that, I'll open the floor to whoever would like to go first.
I think that of all the requests that we've made over the last couple months to see additional information, this kind of wraps it all up for me based on what we've asked for. Dane, I think last time you had asked for more accurate turn templates because they were going across walkways and things like that.
Yeah, the graphic clears it up perfectly, so
yeah,
don't have any further questions.
And I also appreciate the safety measures that have been put forth, and I have no comments on those. I actually like those planters being pulled off the edges of the openings to the loading dock a bit to sweep people out into the main path of that sidewalk a little before they get to that overhead door, so the trucks have a better chance of seeing people. I guess my only question to consider would be, I know on other projects we've required contractors or employees to be there when trucks are using the dock. I mean, this is a pretty busy area, pedestrian-wise, on sidewalks in the city. And I actually don't recall if we've approved cases like this with the back in pull out or pulling back out without having that condition in place. Will, Bernard?
I believe that all the other ones that we did, we had had staff out there, and for safety measures. I think you work with this, with that.
Right. I recall some previous discussion on that with other cases of the exact mechanics of that, of whether it's just another staff contractor, whoever. So there's a second person, or whether it's personnel from the building. But with the nature of the roll-up doors, unless it's just they get opened every day and it's come as you go, there's some degree if someone has to open the doors too, that has to happen.
Right.
Yeah, but I'll jump in. I really appreciate the attention to what the commission said, and coming back with directly, specifically what the commission was asking about in a very clear and with totally the detail that we like to see, and appreciate all of the thought, additional thought that's gone into things like identifying that the curb cut needed to be widened, and addressing kind of how that affects the entire street cross section. There seem to be many elements added to address safety, and Casey, at some point, if you can get us back to the findings that are, we certainly would go to finding that, or meeting that standard there. My question for the commission would be is there anything missing? You've already brought up the, additional personnel that we might reasonably ask that would enhance this further, or does the combination of the multiple measures offered get where it needs to? I like we typically have absolutely requested change of material, as well as the tactile warning strip is nice too. And I like the fact that the planners bump people out to just give that additional sightline.
Maybe we could open it back up and ask if that would pose a problem if we put a condition on the case.
Yes, let's open it back up if you want to address that.
Yeah, we're comfortable with adding a condition. There's a staff member present if that helps the commission find that it's safe. So.
Okay. Any further discussion, or would someone like to make a motion?
No, I think they've met all the findings. I would make a motion to approve this case with a condition that an on-site employee or contractor shall be present when vehicles are entering or exiting the loading dock to provide traffic control.
Loading dock off of South Harrington Street.
Yes.
For clarity.
Does that motion work for the applicant? Does that the wording of that work? All right, is there a second?
A second.
Second from Commissioner Thaxton. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 All those opposed? Seeing none. That carries. So the commission's written decision will now be adopted, when the minutes of this meeting are adopted, and the written decision will be provided to the applicant and other parties with right to such notice following the adoption of the decision. Thank you. Okay, we will now open the evidentiary hearing for item DA 30 2022 105 Ash Ave. And Casey Evans will introduce the hearing.
Okay, the subject property is located at 105 Ash Ave on the southeast side of the street near the intersection of Ash Avenue and Hillsborough Street. The property is zoned commercial mixed use, 5 stories, with urban general frontage conditional use in the special residential parking overlay district. The applicant proposes to develop a 9-lot townhouse subdivision for 2 proposed townhouse buildings. The applicant is requesting a design alternate to the street cross-section to reduce the required right-of-way width, to not provide the utility placement easement, to not construct a bike lane, and to reduce the required back of curb to back of curb width. And here are the 6 design alternate findings that must be satisfied in order to grant a design alternate from the street cross-section requirements. Let me know if you have questions, and again, city transportation staff is available if you have any questions for them as well.
Bradley, Kimbrell Transportation, just confirming I'm available for questions.
Great. The applicant will now present evidence and legal arguments to support of the request. As a reminder, any evidence and arguments most focused on the applicable standards.
Thank you. We've cleared up our confusion. Molly Stewart, Morningstar Law Group. Before I get started, I would like to request that our presentation and application materials be submitted to the record.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm here today with Patrick Barbeau of the Timmons Group. Pat, I'd like to invite you up to be sworn in. And can you describe your education, experience, and history on this project?
Sure. I have a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering from Clarkson University. I've been a licensed professional engineer for over 21 years. I'm published in the state manual on how to design infiltration basins. I've been involved in this project since July of 2021 when we did our first permit application with the city of Raleigh.
And will you restate your name, address, and then I'll swear you in?
Sure. Patrick Barbeau with the Timmons Group, located at 5410 Trinity Road, Raleigh, 27607.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Proceed.
Thank you. Thank you. I'd like to begin by just sort of describing the general location. And here, although you saw an image similar to this one, I'd like to bring your attention to the right-of-way width of Ash Avenue and how it moves through the neighborhood. This is actually in a wide spot. We've got some single-family homes there down the street. To zoom in a little bit, you can see more closely those contours of the Ash Avenue right-of-way. And here we have the site plan for this location with the general layout of the proposed townhomes. There were changes to this street section in November of 2021. This site plan was filed prior to that date, and the old standards apply. And so those are the standards for which we are asking for design alternates today. So this aerial shows some existing development in the area, including the recent development across the street at 109 Park Avenue. We'll begin by addressing the intent to reflect the character of different areas of the city. Pat, could you come up and tell us a little bit about how this area reflects the character of this area of the city?
Sure. This portion of Ash Avenue is consistent with a slightly narrower right-of-way and lack of bike lane, that similar to what we're requesting today. This request will help maintain a consistent street cross-section with not having a bike lane or not having a dedicated 7-foot bike lane. And you can see along Ash that does not exist currently. Further, this request made today is consistent with the previously approved streetscape plan for this area, which is outlined here and governs both sides of Ash Avenue at this location. The right-of-way, back of curb to back of curb, and bike lane request will achieve consistency with the other frontages on this street, while utility easements were provided as part of an earlier plat, which you'll see a little bit later in the presentation. Sure.
Real quick. I just wanted to note and bring to your attention that you have the approved streetscape plan in your materials.
And so here you see an aerial of our site. Our site's kind of the grass strip on the lower side of the Ash Avenue, where we have proposed townhomes. So similar to the recent developments across the street, which you see the building 109 Park Avenue is constructed. The aerial doesn't show 104 Ash, which is constructed kind of in the dirt area to the right of 109. I've designed both of those in 2019. They were constructed for 109 and 2020 for 104 Ash, which doesn't show up on the aerial. But this plan will improve safety through consistency with the surrounding roadway frontages. So our design will be similar to what's done on the north side of Ash Avenue.
Thank you. So I think you've begun to address the ways in which this proposal would not increase congestion or compromise safety. And I think, yeah, so you can talk a little bit more about the surrounding.
So this is a street view of the recent developed. What you're seeing is 104 Ash Avenue, which didn't show up in the aerial, and 109 Park is a little bit further out of view on the street view. But these recently developed properties, which are located across the street from our site, you can see that there's no dedicated bike lane has been provided as part of that development on that side. And kind of a different view. This is from 109 Park apartments, student housing, looking towards our site, towards Hillsborough Street. As you can see, the existing Sharrows, unfortunately, it's half paved over, but there are additional Sharrows located on both the north and south side of Ash Avenue. And this request is also consistent with the city's 10-year bike plan for this location, which calls for bike Sharrows and a shared travelway with vehicles and bicycles. And again, a little better aerial view where you can see the existing Sharrows on both sides of Ash Avenue. Again, going in both directions of the street. And this is the plat we referred to earlier. So this site is part of a master plan that was part of a 2010 rezoning, I believe, where the same developer had developed several properties, including the properties across the street from the site we're talking about today. And as part of that rezoning, a plat was recorded in 2011, which is consistent with the approved streetscape plan that we were using. And I'll show you the second page, where it shows as part of that. As part of that rezoning, you can see here they did dedicate a right-of-way at that time, and they also dedicated. What do you?
You can just draw.
Oh, you can. Okay.
With your finger.
Yeah. Oh, with you. I say it's touched.
We lost our slides.
I see. Sorry. Me and technology. It's,
There you
Just use menu? Oh, you can just, okay. So right here is where the right-of-way is dedicated as part of the 2011 plat, as part of the master plan. In addition, a pedestrian easement was recorded between the Morgan Apartments, which are located behind our site. We have there's a shared parking lot between these two properties. And we also coordinated with public utilities to dedicate a sanitary sewer easement connection, all as part of that master plan.
Thank you. So, Pat, what can you tell us about the effect of these requests on any additional maintenance responsibilities for the city?
Really, there's nothing proposed that's going to be maintained. Sorry. The city maintained right-of-way and paved areas is actually being reduced from the standard street cross-section because we're asking for a DA on the 7-foot bike lane. So actually, the city will have to maintain 7 feet less of pavement.
Thank you. And did you design this street section?
Yeah, yes, I designed it as a licensed professional engineer.
Thank you. All right. And any impacts on stormwater collection or conveyance?
The stormwater is actually going to be reduced because we're proposing less impervious than what we'd have with a 7-foot bike lane, 7-foot dedicated bike lane.
Great. And then the final standard is that the request is reasonable due to several possibilities, one being transitioning from a different street section and consistency with the existing section and the surrounding sections. These have been addressed at length earlier in our presentation, so certainly that is applicable here. Also, that the burden of compliance is not reasonable given the site and intensity of the size of the site and the intensity of development. We've heard today that the previous 2011 master plan did dedicate right-of-way, a pedestrian path, and a utility easement. And finally, what about the intensity of the development?
The remaining area of the site, was created by earlier dedications and development consistent with the master plan for the larger overall site. And every square foot of that remaining area is really needed in order to develop these residences. Without this request we're making today, the remaining area of this portion of the master plan is just not buildable. What we're looking at right now is, a 36.5-foot long townhouse, and there's just really no room to reduce those townhomes and still keep them sellable.
Right. Consistent with that original master plan approved back or platted back in 2011. So you've heard today and you've received in your application materials and your packet the material substantial competent evidence on each of the standards to be met for the granting of the design alternates requested today, and we look forward to addressing any remaining questions you may have.
Thank you. Are there any members of the public who would like to speak on this matter? Seeing none, I'll open it up for commission questions. I'll jump in. I got a couple quick confirmation questions. What's the width of the original right-of-way easement there that you visualized that this slide is on right now? In other words, how many feet?
As you can see, it was 50 feet, and I can't tell you I don't have this in front of me, but I would guess it's maybe 4 or 5 feet they dedicated back in 2011.
And then will you just confirm what's the width of the sidewalk that's currently there and what's the width of the sidewalk that you're proposing?
I guess the existing sidewalk is 6 feet wide. That'll be removed. They'll put in a 3.5 foot with brick pavers. They'll do a 3.5 foot tree rates. Then they'll have a 5 foot sidewalk. And then they'll have a minimum of 5.5 foot greenscape up to the buildings. You can see it in.
So this is mirroring what's on the other side of the street.
Exactly. What you see now is you have 3.5. You have the little paver strip up against the back of curb, the tree grates, and then a 5 foot walkway.
And at its where there's not a tree grate, the full width of the The paver plus sidewalk is what?
It would be 8.5 feet.
Okay.
So the original street plan, if you didn't have the Hillsborough Morgan Street streetscape plan that overrides that, they'd have a 6-foot sidewalk, plus a 7-foot bike lane. So you're actually reducing the overall impervious by 3.5 feet overall from if we had a typical 2-lane undivided street cross section there.
Other questions from the commission?
Yes, I'm just not sure how to pose it yet. All right, so there's a utility easement that you're asking for to be removed from the street cross section, right?
And that was also granted on the 109 Park and the 104 Ash across the street. They waive, at that time, staff could waive that. They can't now, but when I did those, in 2019 and 2020, all those were waived requirements because of that streetscape with the pavers and the street. They just didn't have that grass strip in this Hillsborough Morgan Street streetscape plan.
Okay. I think, Bradley, I've got a couple questions for you. So by eliminating that utility easement, do you have any concern over that?
Staff does not have concerns about eliminating the utility easement.
Okay. At first I was concerned about the elimination of the bike lane, but then they showed that 10-year bike master plan that shows that's intended to be shared, basically a shared road. So for us, is it,
Can I jump in for a second?
Yeah, please.
Do you have any concerns with regards to safety in terms of what's proposed for the design alternate?
Staff does not have any concerns.
Okay.
I mean, I was going to ask just for our benefit. So when there's, the street section requirements, but then there's the bike master plan that kind of shows something different than what the streetscape would imply, that street cross section. Is it pretty typical that we would just waive that requirement on the street section and go with what's in the bike master plan? Because they're at odds with each other, right?
And that's a fair statement. Staff is not in a position where we could waive per se. It's really just understanding the context and understanding the overall plan, to your point. Oftentimes we'll find ourselves in this forum addressing the conflict that you're identifying.
And even so, they were widening that right of way that's on Ash Ave by a bit. So it looked like, for the most part, it's 50 feet or so going down Ash Ave. Are there plans in the future that you know of to try and widen that right of way other than just through normal development projects?
I'm not aware of any plans, no.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I've ridden my bike down that road and I have some concerns.
Me too, but it's very tight.
Any other questions from the commission?
It is much tighter to the south, though, with the houses. I mean,
Well, applicant, do you have any closing remarks you'd like to make before we close?
Only with respect to a couple of points that have come up in discussion with respect to the bike lane. It's just a matter of the expectations of the street users, both the drivers and the cyclists, as far as the consistency of that lane. It hasn't been applied. It wasn't applied across the street. The bike plan doesn't call for it. So this request would maintain that consistent expectation of all the users. I think that was the only issue that came up here. And I'll just note that everything on the streetscape, so above the curb is controlled by the Hillsborough-Morgan Streetscape Plan. That hasn't really come up today as part of my presentation because we're not really asking for anything with respect to that streetscape. So everything that we're asking for is controlled directly by the street standards themselves.
I got one quick question. As far as the other side of the street and that bike lane being waived previously, was that a staff level decision? There's not a previous, under the previous system, there wasn't a.
Right, and I believe that's what I just heard, but I do know that previously staff had some discretion that was applied in similar situations, and that is no longer the case. And you have the history on it.
Yeah, having the history of that, there was no request from transportation staff, and they were transportation staff at that time. There was no request for a bike lane. They just were going to do the sharrows like shown right now.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't remember if that was just not the street cross section at that time, but bike lanes never came up.
Okay.
In either project.
Thank you. Hearing no additional questions or presentation of relevant facts, the commission will now close the hearing and bring the matter to the table. As a reminder, this commission is tasked with deciding if, based off of the evidence presented, this proposal meets the applicable standards. This decision cannot be based on the personal preference of commission members. Rather, it is based on the standards and evidence. If based on its deliberations, the commission requires additional evidence, the commission will reopen the hearing. I'll open it up for whoever would like to go first. Nard, do you want to start us off?
I mean, trying to stay away from my personal preferences because, I mean, I just drove down that street not too long ago, and it's like a tight little street, but if DOT and stuff is saying that they're good and there's not going to be any traffic issues, or, I mean, I'm good with it.
I mean, if anything, they're widening that section by some, not as much as what the streetscape cross-section would require, but better than the rest of Ash Ave, which is tight.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a tricky part about this is obviously the development likelihood and intensity of the rest of Ash being constrained of there's really no likelihood of a bike lane going through the residential portions of it. That said, it's one of few crossings over the railroad tracks, and it connects to a park, so it is a well-used corridor. Yeah, it's tricky.
I mean, to me, it seems like it's all about the reduction of that 32-foot half right-of-way by 4.1 feet, right? Because the rest of it all makes sense, right? No utility easement. We've already confirmed that's not a concern. Bike lane, it's intended to be shared. And then reducing the back curb to back a curb falls in line with getting rid of that bike lane, so. It all comes down to the reduction in that easement or the right-of-way width.
Right. No, I appreciate that there was already a giving of right-of-way. So to come before us in two different structures to get hit twice, it's just unfortunate timing. There's a reason why there's a bike lane requirement now. But 7 feet would be pretty impactful on this cross section, without a doubt. The sidewalk width is wider in parts because it's paving over the verge, and narrower in other parts. You're losing half a foot from the existing sidewalk.
Say that again?
At its narrowest, it's 5.5 feet at the tree grates.
Right. Okay.
Versus the 6 foot existing sidewalk. Obviously, a lot of this derives from the fact that it's just a super constrained. There's just not depth to these parcels to be able to.
I think there are other parts of the street that can never have a bike lane.
Right.
And you might argue that switching from having a bike lane to not having a bike lane for part of the street is more dangerous than a consistent. Creates a bottleneck
Yeah,
situation.
I mean, it happens at every roundabout where all of a sudden you're just out in space. Having previously had a bike lane is terrifying, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And unless the city made a concerted effort to do something along this entire street, you're going to end up with these, notches running down the street as development happens, which, similar to the bike lane, doesn't make a lot of sense.
Right. Yeah, is it worth it to have the right-of-way reserved for a future bike lane, or
And
if
to
it gets
just pull
built
on the
as is,
thread
it
a
will
little
never be
bit,
possible?
right now, as you're coming into this site area section, if the cars and the bikes are together, they're kind of all behaving together. If we introduce a bike lane, then they're forced apart, but then as soon as they come off the image, they're then going to be forced to get together again at the street light. So I think it's just kind of creating havoc as opposed to just letting everybody do their business through this short little section and get to the intersection.
There is on-street parking on the east side of Ash Avenue, south of here. Is that, and I noticed that the east lane is thicker than the west lane. Is there intended to be on-street parking in front of this property? Does anybody know? It looks like there's room for it right now.
We can open it back up in a minute. Does anyone else have any questions or anything else as far as discussion before we do that?
I don't.
Let's open it back up so you can, if you'll address that question as far as on-street parking on the east side of Ash.
Sure. There are no plans. We meet all the city parking requirements because we'll have two-car parking or garage entrances at the rear of the units.
And do you mind going back to the plan that shows that access point for cars? Because they're behind the units, right?
They are behind the units. So that this is the kind of a dumbed down site plan. But you can see the little notch at the rear. That's a two-car garage. So we won't even be using the Morgan. And behind the townhomes, there's the Morgan Street parking, so we don't even require any of that parking. So we're just required to have the two spaces in the garage.
This might be a better question for Bradley, but
Yep.
will the street be restriped or resurfaced and the center lane centered, or will it remain kind of as it is now with the wider east lane?
So I'm not aware of any plans the city has to restripe, resurface. When an operation like that is coming, staff can evaluate, is this the right time to make a change? How would that change affect the nature of the street? Potentially introducing on-street parking where it was not, that has an effect. Removing on-street parking where it exists, which is just south of here, does also have an effect. On-street parking can be a traffic calming measure in itself. So sorry if that was indirectly answering your question.
No, you answered it. Yeah, my fear here is the lanes are too wide, unfortunately, in terms of safety.
One other question for you, Bradley. Does this access point for off-street parking complicate the issue at all for you? Are there any concerns with that?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch the first part.
This access point for the off-street parking, in light of other things we've been talking about, does that complicate any of your reading of this, or?
It doesn't complicate it. Doesn't.
Is it already there?
It is an existing
Okay,
access
great.
point.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, it's an existing. You can see it.
Okay, so it's not moving.
Could we go back to the street view of this area that we had up earlier where we saw the bike lane? I think it was the one facing the other direction.
Yep.
Yeah, that one there. And I think you pointed out how the striping is kind of paved over and it just looks really uneven. I think is kind of what we were getting at.
And what happens in
Want to consider recommending at least cleaning it up a little bit so the bike lane indicators are not half, yeah, they're clean, they're not half paved over.
Yeah.
Just kind of bringing it up to standard.
what they did in this
we can
instance,
recommend.
it's typical when you have some curb work, they'll mill and overlay half the travel lane, and that's exactly what they did here, except without restriping the Charo. It's probably a good slide to be shown of, you're seeing sometimes what contractors do in the field and nobody catches it.
Right. I guess we wouldn't want that to happen on the other side, right?
Right.
Is there any way to require that?
I think that's
'Cause the
a little
city does
beyond
that.
our scope
Yeah,
today.
it's not on them.
Any further questions from the commission? Okay, thank you. We'll close it back again. Can Casey, can you pull up the finding slide? Does someone want to make a motion or either that or kind of walk through some of these findings out loud for the group?
I mean, based on that 2010 master plan or 2011 master plan that was done, I think the design is improving on that. Even though it doesn't meet the cross section that we're talking about, I think just the nature and the context of the street doesn't really allow it. Like, we wouldn't want this one project to follow that street section if the rest of this road does not follow that street section. I think it would complicate matters for all the reasons that we talked about. Just looking at the intent of Article 5, I brought that up, just looking at general provisions from the UDO, and I think it meets the intent of those, and I think everybody that we heard from, including staff, agrees that we're not increasing congestion or compromising safety, at least not any more than it does today, and meets all the rest of those findings. And so because of that, I will make a motion to approve this case as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Springer.
Competing for second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Find my script. The Commission's written decision will be adopted when the minutes of this meeting are adopted. The written decision will be provided to the applicant and other parties with right to such notice following the adoption of the decision. Thank you.
And thank you for your service to the city.
Yep. We will now open the evidentiary hearing for item
What else are you going to do there?
DA 1, 2023. If the applicant will come forward, or excuse me, Casey's going to introduce the hearing for us.
Thanks. The subject property is located at 220 East Morgan Street, at the southwest corner of East Morgan Street and South Person Street. The property is zoned downtown mixed use, 40 stories, urban general frontage, conditional use. The applicant proposes a mixed-use building including residential apartments, structured parking, and ground floor commercial uses. The applicant is requesting a design alternate to reduce the minimum build-to required along South Person Street, as well as a design alternate for complete relief from the 12-foot step-back requirement, also along South Person Street. Build-to is the amount of site width that must contain principal building facade. The urban general frontage requires 70% of building facade be located not more than 20 feet from the edge of the right-of-way. We have 3 design alternate findings that must be met in order to grant a design alternate for build-to. For buildings 13 stories or taller, a minimum of 12-foot step back is required along each side of the building facing a public street. And that step back is required to occur above the first floor but below the 13th floor. And there are 5 findings that are required to be satisfied in order to grant a design alternate for the building massing step back requirement. With that, I'm available for questions. Do you have any?
Thank you. The applicant will now present evidence and legal arguments in support of the request. As a reminder, any evidence and argument must focus on the applicable standards. And if you want to swear everyone in at once.
Yeah, that'd be great. So, Toby Coleman, 150 Fayetteville Street, Raleigh.
Tim Carter, 421 Fayetteville Street with Kimley Horn,
Okay, relation to the,
engineer of record.
awesome. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you'll provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Great.
Bill Loomis, architect with Smallwood Architects out of Atlanta, 3495 Piedmont Road, Atlanta, Georgia, 30305.
Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you will provide will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, members of the Appearance Commission. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Toby Coleman. I am an attorney for the applicant, 150 Fayetteville Street here in Raleigh. Here we go. So as Casey mentioned, this is a request for a couple of design alternates to facilitate the construction of a new building. As you can see, it's at the corner of East Morgan and South Person Street, just north. It's in what is now currently a parking lot north of the Marbles Museum. We'll get into some details. You can see that rendering of the building. It's a 30-story building. The zoning is 40 stories. It's max. There's a zoning condition that limits it to 30 stories. There's a couple of issues going on that I'll just go ahead and highlight for you here. So basically, a lot of this has to do with some unique aspects of the site. First, the building is going at this corner, and so it's sort of in a triangle. And second, you have this area right here at the bottom. It's about a 70-foot deep area, about 120 feet long as it runs along the frontage of South Person Street. And it is subject, and it's a copy of the easement is in your packet. It's subject to an easement in favor of Marbles, in favor of Wake County on behalf of Marbles Museum that requires retaining that area for pickup and drop off for Marbles Museum. They use it basically for pickup and drop off for day camps at their side entrance there. It also requires preservation of some parking. So, as I mentioned, or as Casey mentioned, we have two design requests. One is for relief from the build to requirement, specifically the requirement that says that the building has to take up 70% of the South Person Street frontage. And the second request is for an alternative building massing standard. We don't meet the 12-foot step back requirement for the upper stories. And Bill will go into some detail about sort of how we're meeting that, how we're setting up the alternative massing requirement. The build to requirement, Tim Carter with Kimley Horn is here and can speak to any detailed questions. But in terms of, it's a fairly simple request and a fairly simple basis for the request. The building along South Person Street is almost 153 feet long. The total frontage is 331 feet. So you're just under 50% of that frontage area. So we're not meeting that requirement. The primary reason, as you can see, is that area shaded in blue-gray is the area subject to the easement with Marbles, and it takes up 120 feet or 37.5% of the frontage. So, no matter what we did here, we could not meet the 70% requirement, and we do meet the requirement along East Morgan, and so given this site-specific condition and the fact that this development will add to the street wall. This is currently a parking lot, and will add to sort of the street wall and the urban sense of the area, and the fact that it preserves a pretty important aspect for Marbles Museum. We're asking for a design alternate on that one. My next slide, I believe, goes to the massing request. So I'll take a pause there If you guys have any questions, or if you want me to move on, I'm happy to do that. I'll leave it up to the board.
Let's keep rolling.
Okay. So the next request is the alternate building massing request. This is a result of the triangular shape of the parcel. Here you see a rendering. This is looking sort of southwest at the building, sort of at the point of the triangle. And I'm going to hand it over to Bill Loomis to talk about the specifics of this request. Long story short, there's a belt at level 7 with a smaller setback of about almost 3 feet, and then the rest of the building going up is not really set back from the base. So, Bill, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you. So, based on the geometry of the site, like was previously stated, with the easement on the south end of Person Street, we are forced to push the building into the corners of this triangular shape to maintain the efficiency of the building with the condition of the 30-story limit in the zoning conditions. We pushed the floor plate of the residential plans out all the way. We're meeting the alternate conditions through the differentiated podium versus the tower. We have, as mentioned, we have the belt at level 7 that's recessed back to increase the definition of the two facades. We have accentuated the base with lighting that you can see in elevation there, that will create a wind block at the edge and accentuate around the screening of the parking deck. And the first floor is highly transparent with retail all the way down South Person Street. You know, the overall width of that tower along Person.
I can give you the next slide.
Ah, perfect. Yeah, so the tower along South Person Street is 75 feet compared to the overall frontage of 330 feet, and the podium itself is about 142 feet. So we have that stepped facade along Person. We are meeting the step back requirements along Morgan. We do have that all along the long side of the building there. And you can see the site plan here as it fits into this triangular shape. And then the footprint of the residential floors in plan, they're 61 feet wide. So this is a very narrow residential plan. You're just getting the larger 75 foot because of the angle, the acute angle of the site there, how it cuts off the floor plate.
So that is our presentation. I think with Bill's presentation, you've seen that this does meet all of the building massing standards. It's consistent with the intent in that they find sort of an alternative way to meet. You know, the intent is to not have a building that's looming over you that doesn't create shadow impacts or shading impacts. This through a narrowing of the building, a distinguishable base, and a belt that shows, belting that shows some setbacks, along with the fact that basically you have an acute angle of the building, so it's sort of a triangular piece, achieves a lot of the sort of massing effects that the regulations are looking for. It's a unique and interesting building, I would also add. Obviously, this is because of the size and shape of this property, they have to do a bit of a unique building shape here. So it'll be an interesting addition to the Raleigh skyline. Happy to answer any questions.
Great. Are there any members of the public here today? Seeing none, I will open it up for the commission to ask some questions of the applicant.
Toby, if I'm doing my math right, you said that's a 120-foot easement, or,
Approximately, yeah.
yeah. So if the whole length is 330 feet, take off 120 from that. If you were to just look at that compared to the 153 feet that the building is, I think my math says that would be about 73% frontage.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, that little piece, I know I mentioned it earlier, but just to emphasize, this piece, that's about 70, a little under 70 feet wide. So there's a lot of unique history with this property, but you know, I'm not sure. You know, this piece is involved in the property. I think they have the right to use it for shared parking, but they have to preserve it both for parking and for access for marbles in perpetuity.
And that's through an easement?
Through an easement, yeah, an access easement. They, it was, so just some history again. One of the things that had to happen was that this property had, prior to the sale, had actually a bus easement that ran through it and some other additional access easements. So basically what happened as part of the sale and redevelopment was that those aspects of the easements were renegotiated, and everybody, I think, came to a good solution. But one of the things that was very important to Marbles, apparently because this is where all the day camp students come in, was we need to preserve this. It needs to be sort of a safe spot, things like that.
So in the new plan, that's essentially going to be like the entry court and also access for marbles, just so I understand.
I'll let Tim speak to that. I think I'll let Tim speak to that.
Yeah, so the main purpose of this drive will be for loading, and buses actually will be driving up. It'll be a one-way drive that they will stop, let kids out, pick kids up, and then they would exit out through this way back onto Person Street.
And it's also used to access parking for the new proposed project, is that right?
So these parking spaces that are located out here are only parking for the Marbles Museum, and then
Asking about the drive entering the proposed project.
The drive entering into the deck would be used coming in here and entering the deck there, and then they would exit out this way as well. So it kind of separates both the bus drop-off as well as the people who are living in the apartments.
And how wide is that? Is that drive that's shared in both directions?
So this drive that's shared is I believe it's a 20-foot drive. We have. Yes, it's a 20-foot drive.
Just any consideration given in that configuration to the future potential of Person Street to be two-way?
So after discussion with staff, the two-way conversion does not have, it's the current plans have stopped another street above. I think if it were to be a two-way, I think it would still function.
Yep. In your
properly.
opinion, it would still function?
It would still function.
Okay.
That's right.
And then just confirming I believe that's a multi-use path that's pictured on the north side. Is that a 14-foot multi-use path that was proposed
Is that one that you're talking about?
Yeah, is that what's pictured there?
So that's actually a 10-foot wide multi-use path. That's part of the
BRT implementation.
The BRT improvement project.
Okay,
that's correct.
I've got a question for Toby or the architect. Just confirming when it comes to the setback that you're saying it's not possible to step back from Person Street in any meaningful capacity as it's currently designed.
You're talking about the building step back?
Yes.
Well, to maintain the, with the 30-foot or 30-story limit and the shape of the site, to create any alternative floor plate configuration with an L or anything like that, even with the acute angle, we aren't able to get the efficiency that we need to make this project feasible from a runnable area.
Okay.
And so we had the straight bar is the most efficient layout for this. And so to hit those targets, we had to stretch it all the way to the extent of the podium.
I'm going to ask another question. I will defer to, when we get to discussion, I'll defer to the architects here. Did you look at, previous cases have, not stepped back the full width of the requirement, but have stepped back a portion of that. Is that something you guys looked at?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, any step back at all, you're looking at above 12, so we'd be 18 floors worth of step back there, and it's just a reduction of the rentable area, which hurt their performa.
Okay.
And so with that, we were trying to maximize it as much as possible.
And the step back on Morgan Street is how much?
It meets the 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
And on Person Street, it's 0?
Zero.
Step back? 0? Okay.
Can we see the upper level plan?
Sure.
Not the band on level 7. Do you have the plan above that? Level 8?
That one.
Yeah.
So you can see there on the north, the step back from the podium.
Beyond the belt, as you refer to it, we've also seen cases that do material change and other kind of architectural elements to accentuate that middle layer. Was that something you explored for this?
Well, we've got the immediate change between the tower and the podium with the parking deck screening and the window wall of the residential tower. I mean, there's that abrupt change in material. To add a third material in there, I think you're going to lose the effect of that abrupt change and separation of the podium. We want to take effect of the shadow line of that recess, that approximate 3-foot recess, and one thing we could possibly look at is a change in glass, just so that you get a subtle material change there, but that's something we can consider.
Can you describe the facade treatment of the podium, the band, and the
Sure.
and the tower? And specifically, I think I understand the tower and the band. The tower and the podium.
Mm-hmm.
Is the band? Is the fenestration of the band in any way different than the fenestration of the tower, in addition to being set back? Or?
Yeah, so you can see here, let's go to the...
I mean, it looks more transparent, is
yes.
where I'm going. Okay.
Yeah, so what you're seeing here in the white and the red in these elevations here are metal panels and louvered panels for the mechanical systems of the residential units. And so it's creating a random pattern coming down through the main portion of the tower. At the podium level, there will not be those metal panels. So it'll be a more simplified window wall treatment at that recess.
Thanks.
Yeah, what you're seeing there down here are the columns themselves, not the metal panels.
Further questions from the commission, Chris?
What's the, how far does that band set back from the podium?
It's 2 foot 8 feet.
Okay.
And the height of that is we're 14.8 floor to floor on that band.
I'm sorry. It's set back 2'8" under the tower.
Yeah.
On all sides. Okay.
Is this rendering reflecting what looks to be terraces occurring at the odd floors 9 upward?
So there has been some back and forth with DOT on that configuration, and they've recently come, Tim, you've had that conversation.
Yeah, so DOT recently said that any kind of encroachment into the right-of-way would require air rights. And so we are looking into what that process looks like, but probably is being removed from encroaching into the right-of-way.
Further questions from the commission?
But I do want to, you still will have the alternating bands. Every other floor will have a maroon, copperish slab edge cover alternating all the way up the building. So you get that 2-floor expression in the tower.
I did have one other question. Is there the possibility of further recessing the band only on the Person Street side? It seems like I understand there's
We could study that, yes.
Okay, I understand there's a significant
Yeah,
leasable
so
square footage loss to do it all 18 stories.
that section of the floor plate is the fitness center.
So it could
Yeah,
push
so
and
we
pull
could
if
we
it
could
needed.
push and pull.
Okay.
We could look at that.
Okay. Toby, anything further?
No, nothing further. I think we've addressed the questions in terms of both the build to and the alternative height, massing height. Certainly willing if you guys have questions related to conditions, willing to chat with them. I know that there's a couple raised there, but otherwise, I think we're set where we are.
Thank you. Hearing no additional questions or presentation of relevant facts, the commission will now close the hearing and bring the matter to the table. As a reminder, this commission is tasked with deciding if, based off of the evidence presented, this proposal meets the applicable standards. This decision cannot be based on the personal preference of commission members. Rather, it is based on the standards and evidence. If, based on its deliberations, the commission requires additional evidence, the commission will reopen the hearing. I will go first. I think of the two requests, the first one seems pretty straightforward, given the easement, as well as addressing Morgan Street as the primary street, and then that dictates the the design of the building and being able to pull up to Person Street. It's a weird configured shape, so it also creates interesting elements like from Person Street. Say you're traveling north, you get way more of the building because it's at an angle. So to some degree, you do get the step back from Person Street because of that, because how it addresses it at an angle, which is interesting. Thoughts on maybe we break it up. The first thoughts on the first design alternate as far as the.
It just seems like no other option, and
Right.
and they've done a good job responding to it.
Yeah, agreed.
Agreed.
And if you take out that easement, then they have actually met the frontage requirement, so I have no issue with
Yeah.
that.
Right. Good.
I agree.
Okay. As far as building massing, I'll let someone else jump in.
It seems very sheer to just have all 18 stories right on the property line with the justification to be maximizing the FOR or FAR. We've seen other buildings around town that sit right on the property line, and there seems to be a real architectural reason for it, like it's coming down and addressing the lobby or announcing the building entrance. This seems to be kind of two buildings, podium and tower, and the tower has almost no relief. So I do have concerns that it's going to feel looming on the curb, on the corner there, with zero relief from the setback.
I feel the same way, but my negative reaction to that is softened by how thin that portion of the facade is. And then I think as you're moving up Person Street, because of how sharp the corner is, you will read a relief between that northeast corner of the tower and the northeast corner of the podium well before you get to the intersection. Probably, halfway up the block, you will start to read a relief even though there's not one. So, it's one thing that's always frustrating about the code is it's only thought of in plan and elevation, but in reality, I think you will sense a setback very early in your experience moving up Person Street. So I'm less concerned by it. I wish there was more relief for the band, at least on that side. I think it would make sense for it to be probably 4 to 6 feet at least, so that there's a true gap that you can read there, and it sounds like it might be easy to achieve that.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
I would agree with that too. And just looking at the plan, I'm sure design is still being figured out logistically, but there's that little swath of basically patio or roof between two columns that you can't even get to. So if you pull the glass off a little more, make the fitness center a little smaller, it might actually help you in a maintenance perspective.
You can have an outdoor track.
There you go.
I don't know if it's
Right.
big enough for that, but
Yeah.
I agree, and I don't know if we want to put a dimension on what that minimum relief would be. We probably should, just to give them a little more clarity. And I think the other, Matt, I agreed with I've agreed with all the comments being made so far, but we have had some other projects where the step back hasn't met the intent of the UDO for the entire length, but when you look at it in aggregate, it does. And so I can see, similar to your point about that being a pretty thin swath of the building, and you're reading that step back before you even get to the intersection. I mean, technically, if you look at the podium on that south side of it, it is step back much more than 12 feet before you get to the building. So it's kind of like half of the podium has the step back required above it, and half of it doesn't. So I have no problem with the way that it was presented, but agree with probably requesting something a little deeper at that band.
Yeah, it's thin. Because it's thin, it's also less impactful in terms of the rentable area to adjust it. But I do appreciate that the long face is fully, holistically, the design, the more impactful face meets the standard, which is great. Yeah, in terms of the intent of the regulation there, yeah, I have a little bit of concern that the belt alone doesn't quite fully get to at least how we have addressed some of these cases previously in terms of the level of additional materiality or other design elements that go to create that breakup of design. But if you, deferring to some of the architects here, if you guys feel like additional relief on that 7th floor would get to it, then I'm on board with that.
I mean, I think this vantage point is advantageous to the application because it points out that I know our personal opinions don't come into play here, but this is a much more attractive building than most of the towers in Raleigh. In part because, and this gets to a less subjective comment, in part because of the clarity of how materials are applied, that the base and the tower are different from each other. And I actually agree with the suggestion the applicant architect made that if you start to dress this up in a way to further distinguish them from each other, it might actually harm the overall quality of what's being proposed. I guess I would say that additional relief in the band area would satisfy me personally and maintain the clarity of the design because it's a very attractive building.
I would agree with that.
Yeah. I don't think it'll be a super visible element, particularly from a pedestrian scale, given the rest of the drama of the building. But I'm on board with that if you guys feel good about it. Would someone like to, I guess, frame what you would like to see in terms of that additional relief?
Who wants to make the motion? Matt?
I would like to, but I've never made a motion before, so.
Go for it.
But-
man. First meeting, first time.
Just to break it down, what would you propose in terms of what's, reasonable in addressing that seventh floor?
I think pushing it back far enough that there's room to move between the columns and the recessed wall of the band would be not only sufficient from a setback perspective, but also functional in a nice way, probably for the use of the building. So I don't know how deep those columns are. They look like they're about 2 to 3 feet deep.
Yeah, I'll open it back up in a second for.
So I'd push for, at least a 6-foot recess, which would give you 3 to 4 feet of clear walking space in between the columns and the wall.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, because if the setback right now is, I think you said just under 3 feet, 6 feet would be, seems like it would be maintainable and would give us what we're looking for.
So we're saying 6 feet from the
Face of
the face of the.
From the face of the podium to the,
Okay.
or provided there's at least, 3 or 4 feet clear between the back of the column and that wall.
I will stick to the 6 feet out of simplicity, unless you feel strongly that be 3 feet from the back of the column.
I think if we
I
said.
think by code, it needs to be 3 feet from the back of the column
I
if you're going to be
agree.
moving through it, so.
And columns tend to change size.
Can we ask how
sometimes.
deep the column is?
Yeah, that's a good
Yeah,
point.
let's open back up.
I know you're early
and-
on, you might not know for sure.
And Catherine, maybe you have a.
To Dane's point, I mean, columns could change
Columns to change size, if we just
during
say,
design.
hold an accessible space to bypass
Yep.
between the back of the column and the enclosure.
And it's really 2 conditions. It's the 6-foot setback and the 3 feet clear.
Let's open up.
Columns,
Any
I believe,
suggestion?
are 24 inches deep on
Okay.
that side.
And they'll
'cause
be
they're
wrapped.
rotated, I believe,
Okay, and they'll be wrapped in something, so they might.
possibly. They haven't decided if they're going to leave them exposed or not.
So, preserving as much flexibility for future design changes. What's a condition based off of the conversation you think you would make sense?
3-foot path behind the columns.
Yep, that
So-
makes sense.
That is also at least six
At
feet
least a
from.
6-foot setback in addition. I'd just say both things.
Okay, Catherine, do you have an attempt at that?
I have a 10, but y'all are gonna have to help me. What was that last part? 3 feet?
So it's basically 2 parts. One part is 3 feet from the back of the column.
Okay, that's in 3.
From the back of the finished face of the column, because there could be an enclosure around it.
Of the column on the tower.
No, on
On the
the
amenity level.
7th floor band.
Okay, y'all are gonna have to help me. So here, and I'm working off of this exhibit, but so, no feelings hurt, correct this as much as you can. So I have the building step back at level 7 on the east elevation. Between the face of the parking podium and the face of the tower shall be a minimum of 6 feet. And 3, okay, and this is where I get confused about the column part. I have in 3 feet from the back of the finished face of the column on the band. But I don't know if that makes sense with the rest of the,
A minimum of 6 feet while maintaining 3-foot path behind the columns, I think is what you want to say.
Correct.
Yeah, I can.
There we
It
go.
would be the 3 feet, the columns on the
On Person Street, just these 2
Just on
columns.
Person Street.
on the facade facing Person Street.
Yeah, there's only 2 columns right there and there.
okay, shall be a minimum of 6 feet while maintaining a 3-foot path between the finished floor of the columns on the facade facing Person Street.
Finished
A-
face.
Finished
A
face.
3-foot
Face.
path between the finished interior face of the columns and the recessed band wall, or something like that.
Building
And the
enclosure.
Or in the exterior wall. Yeah.
Okay, and okay, so 3 feet is between the finished interior face of the columns
Yeah.
and the exterior
Wall.
exterior wall. That's sufficient to,
it.
y'all know, okay.
Yep.
And so
I mean,
the
I'll
entire
read it back
thing.
again, yeah. Okay, so the building step back at level 7 on the east elevation between the face of the parking podium and the face of the tower shall be a minimum of 6 feet while maintaining a 3-foot path between the finished interior face of the columns and the exterior wall.
That's
No, I
You-
wouldn't say tower. I would say
Level
the
7.
recessed
And she was
facade.
describing the recessed facade between the podium and the tower. That's
Yeah,
why tower
not
was
the
in there.
tower, but
Yeah.
at the recessed
Just level
facade.
7.
Okay,
Is
okay.
there-
You can just say level 7.
It says,
Level 7.
it says it just at level 7. So it says the building step back at level 7 on the east elevation between the face of the parking podium and the face of the tower.
Yeah, that's good.
And where you said 3 feet, I would just add minimum before that.
Yep.
While
Minimum
maintaining
3
a
feet.
minimum,
Minimum in both cases, I would say.
yeah, we have minimum for 6. A minimum 3-foot path, right?
And you guys are good with 3-foot path as a appropriately interpretable?
Yeah, I wish we had a plan reviewer here to make sure they understand when it comes
That's
in.
code speak.
Yeah, okay, I'm trusting you guys a lot on that.
You could add the word clear path, and it would, yeah.
Can I say pedestrian?
Nah, I would say clear
Oh,
path.
that's
Say
a different
clear
term,
path.
sorry.
That's good.
3-foot clear path.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want to read it one more time, and I can confirm whether or not it will make sense for a plan
Perfect,
reviewer?
perfect.
Yep, if that would make everyone feel comfortable.
Thank you, Catherine, and everyone for machining this out.
All right, this is a new kind of condition y'all haven't done. So the building step back at level 7 on the east elevation between the face of the parking podium and the face of the tower shall be a minimum of 6 feet while maintaining a minimum 3-foot clear path between the finished interior face of the columns and the exterior wall.
Yeah, I think that's manageable, yeah.
Everybody good?
Yeah. So I'll close again,
Yes.
and I will make a motion to approve with the condition as just read.
I think you should try to say the condition again. I'm just kidding.
Not going to do it. Is there a second?
A second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Seeing none, motion carries. Thank you, guys. The commission's written decision will be adopted when the minutes of this meeting are adopted, and the written decision will be provided to the applicant and other parties with the right of such notice following adoption of the decision. And I believe that takes us to minutes on the agenda. Thank you.
Yeah, the minutes unless Catherine or you have any report to make.
Okay, Catherine, any report?
Nothing for me.
I do not have a report, other than to say we have retreat coming up on Wednesday, the 15th, and that's at the Wetland Center, correct?
Yeah, the retreat's at the Walnut Creek Wetland Center at 4:30. We have it till 7:30. Obviously, if you don't want to take the whole 3 hours, you don't have to, but we have it reserved from 4:30 to 7:30.
Great, and there'll be dinner provided.
Yep.
And usually we have a guest speaker too. We're still working on the agenda,
Correct. We're working on the agenda.
but hopefully everyone can make it. It's always a good time. It helps frame the year and heads into work plan too, which will also get done soon. Any other items you want to mention, Casey, as far as?
Not about the retreat, but I will just mention, since you invited me to up here to say something, just to keep it on your radar, that April 20th, that regularly scheduled second meeting of the Appearance Commission in April, we have Nick and Chuck from NC State planning to come and do his final presentation on the legacy project that they're doing for the Midtown Waterfront Park project.
Is that the final presentation?
Yes, yeah, on his final report. We did have a workshop with him on Monday of this week with a number of staff to give, kind of technical feedback and information. And he had prepared sort of 3 kind of scopes of work. I think I emailed that out to the commission. If I didn't, let me know and I can do that. But it was a really great work session. There's a lot of good discussion, and we're really excited to see what he presents in April. So please plan to attend that meeting. It should be a really good discussion.
And we're going to do that in room 303?
Yes, that's the plan right now.
Okay.
So we have our quasi-judicial meeting at the beginning of each month, and then we have the second meeting 2 weeks apart. And so later this month, that we'll be canceling our regular meeting in lieu of having the retreat. What would be the day before that? So instead of the Thursday meeting, we'll have our retreat on Wednesday, and then the April 2nd meeting we'll use for the updates you just provided. So the one we had in December was a great meeting. And that was great to have invited other members of other commissions and community. I thought that was a really fun, lively, entertaining session. So I don't think if you have emailed the scope out, I hadn't seen it for the.
Maybe I just sent it among staff. Maybe I didn't send it to you guys, but I can do that.
Okay. Anything else, Sir Walter, or anything else?
Nothing at this time.
I just want to make sure I heard that date correct. You said April 2nd?
April
20th.
Wait, 20th.
Yeah, it would be the third Thursday.
Yeah, I was like.
Yeah.
Cases, do we have any cases for April 6th, or how many cases
We do.
we have?
I think 3, but let me double check.
Okay.
Yeah, 3.
All right.
Yes. Yeah.
Wait, that includes the one that was pushed from this?
Yes.
Okay.
Obviously tonight we were pretty tight on quorum. We ended up making it in time. Thank you guys for being here. I thought we moved pretty efficiently through that. But
Those are pretty easy cases, it seemed like. I imagine they're sometimes harder than
The
that.
first one was much harder last time.
Okay. So y'all had
It took a lot
you
more
already
time.
nibbled on it.
there
Shoot on it.
also were,
Like an
Twice
hour.
before.
Okay.
that last one was 2. We've previously seen 16 or 17 alternates on one case. Those go a bit longer. So transitioning now to the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? And would someone like to make a motion to approve or edit with?
No, I'll make a motion to approve.
Is there a second?
A second.
Awesome. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None. Motion carries. All right, I think that's it for the agenda, unless anyone else has anything they want to say. If not,
No, just to welcome Matt to the commission. Great to have you.
all right.
And yeah, great comments tonight. Great to have your input. And for Will for leading his first meeting as vice chair for the commission. Congrats. Well
Thank you.
done.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.